Thanks for joining with such big numbers, a bit surprising. So my name is Timo Perala. I work at Nokia Open Source Program Office, and at the as the slide over there shows, I'm also a co-chair of this Eclipse-hosted Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group, which has taken on it as its task to help open source community to survive under CRA, kind of educate, find answers to questions that are there, obviously, and all those things. However, this is not a talk that kind of represents ORC view. This is not vetted there. We didn't go through that. So this is mostly my personal views, and I believe also to some extent company views. So I have been with this ORC work now from not exactly from the beginning, but more than 2 years I've been following it, and because I'm a recovering standardization person, then I'm also involved with the official standardization activities of the CRA, and all those things I will a little bit touch then when going through the presentation. Maybe to activate the audience as well a little bit, so maybe show of hands, who's read the CRA text? Now I'm gonna preach to the choir. I don't know if that's a good place to be, but okay, anyway, so good. But then there are some who have not. So that's also good. Maybe you get some pointers and food for thought. So let's use technology. Wow. So what I thought, because of course not knowing what kind of mix of an audience I will have, I thought that it might be prudent to sort of start from kind of why does this CRA exist? So Cyber Resielience Act, a law made by European Union, and what is the reason for that it exists? And I think the kind of the first quote there clearly points out that cyber attacks are a matter of public interest, so it's like it touches the whole of the union, the population there, and it's not only kind of something that is unpleasant and puts people in difficult places, but it's also impacting the economy, obviously, but also the society at large, like democracy is in jeopardy, consumer safety is in jeopardy, and even health. And I mean, those are pretty serious things. So obviously there was, I think, at least my opinion is that the motivation is kind of proper, it's correct. And why this is then? Why do we have this problem? Well, low level of cybersecurity. So maybe we need to look at the mirror. Why are the products with low cybersecurity? And also the insufficient and inconsistent provision of security updates. So even if something's found to be wrong and not okay, we don't get, as consumers, we don't get the fixes. So the problems persist. And then, of course, for the consumer, I always use my mom, who's 84. How much does she understand of the gadgets that are in her life? Not much. so they're kind of the users. We don't know how we could make the product secure. So help in that space. So motivation, I hope you agree with me that it's okay. There are seats over on this side if you're not into standing, so please grab a seat. And then, of course, I mean, there's a motivation, something has to be done. So what's the impact of the CRA? What is the intended impact? So, well, I think Jim Semlin this morning gave a trillion figure of the value of the open source, and now we see here another trillion figure. So this is a major thing. So the CRA, Cyber Resilience Act, then aims to safeguard us as a consumers and also the businesses using those digital or products with digital elements, software, when they buy them and use them. And of course, with all that, what the CRA then puts the manufacturers to do, it would mean that the inadequate security features would cease to exist. So we would improve. All good. So basically, it all boils down to this. CE mark. When you put a product into the union market, your product needs to carry a CE mark. And now this is going to happen also with software. Didn't happen before, now it's there. So we need to get our act together so that we are able to sell something at the union market or put our products in union market when the CRA is in effect. So I think that, I mean, if somebody questions the kind of severity of the CRA, just need to show this to that doubtful person, and they should understand that need to take it really seriously. Oh, well, by the way, and I forgot to say in the beginning, so I will try to leave some time to the end for discussion, comments, guidance, and especially debate would be interesting, because I think at this point in time we are all learning and there are a lot of open questions. We may have different views, different takes on what this CRA is and what are its impacts. So it would be interesting to hear from you, and I could also learn something then while having that discussion. So hopefully there is some time at the end. Okay, so pretty much just bringing it together that what I have now said is the impact on our industry, on the software industry. So the left-hand box there is like just wrapping up the couple of previous slides. I'm not going to dive into much detail, but then even if the CRA is like the title said, it's approved. Well, that's all fine, but it's not done and dusted. So we are now into the first year of working on to the target end of year 27, when this all becomes into effect. And in the meantime, there's going to be work done in the standardization, which leads to harmonized standards, which is a way for the industry to kind of explain how best to achieve compliance with the law or adhere to the law. And this work is done by these two European standardization organizations, which are accredited by the Commission or the Union to provide European norms, and CENELEC and ETSI. So that's pretty much what I'm going to talk then the rest of the presentation about that work, a little bit less than 2.5 years to go. What is also, in addition to that CE marking, another motivation to be a good EU citizen when putting stuff on the market is the penalties. So Commission has, or Union has had some regulation before that was intending for all kinds of good end results, but they didn't have any means to push. So it was like pretty much dead letter. But they learned. So now this one has upfront a penalty set. And I think it's fairly meaningful, like 2.5% of your annual global turnover when a product is on the market and is not complying is a big lump of money out of the shareholders' pocket if that happens. So I think it is also a good motivator to take it seriously and think about how to get act together. Just not a random list of topics that are impacted by the CRA, but it's like pretty much throughout the product creation, maintenance, and the ways of doing things are being impacted. So it starts from you need to have specific documentation, you need to have the SBOMs for everything, you need to have your product security and vulnerability management according to the requirements. You need to report the vulnerabilities to the official bodies that are, well, NISA is one, but then there is going to be other bodies that need to be informed as well. The whole the whole pipeline of how you build your product, where you get your components, the third-party part of the software and all that is included, and it's the manufacturer's responsibility. And the blue ones over there are for obvious reasons because we are in the open source summit. So this is now regulation that touches on open source. Sort of, I guess, first time as big as kind of in a big effect as it is. There may have been something already earlier, but I would say that by far this is now the most significant. So I've just put it here so that I've been talking about manufacturer quite a lot, because most of the things that are in the CRA are for the manufacturer to comply. So I didn't want to write or copy-paste all the requirements there. I just say that it's if you place a product in the market, then pretty much the thing, that paper is for you to understand and comply. But then there is this new kid in the block that didn't exist before. It's this open source software steward. So it didn't exist, for example, in the drafts that were circulated in 23. But then open source community took actions and started the dialogue, was able to start the dialogue with the Commission. So then Commission understood that the open source is different from the manufacturer, or need to be dealt differently from a manufacturer's. So then there is a kind of a list of things, who's open source software steward and what they need to do. And mostly it's about this providing systematical support on a sustained basis. So you have kind of you're doing it for real, and you're doing it for like a longer period of time. So not like just a few months or so, but it's sustained. And the steward is then documenting processes. That's what they have to do, security processes, policies, and the reporting obligation is there as it is with manufacturer, but it's kind of more on a voluntary basis. And then cooperation with market surveillance authorities, which are the ones who are kind of checking the manufacturers that they are actually complying. That is also kind of, it's not voluntary, but it's like when the market surveillance authority approaches, then it is expected that the steward will collaborate. So there are some things that are to be done by this new entity, but it's not necessarily a new entity. So I think it's quite clear that many of the big foundations today already see themselves, and I think they have already, all of them pretty much stated that they see themselves as stewards. So that's kind of a new role for them. I think at this point it's worthwhile to mention that not all open source projects will have a steward. And I think, well, some people say that even it will be so that the majority of the open source projects will not. I don't know, your mileage may vary, but I think it's still relevant to note that there are many projects that will not have a steward. And if a manufacturer uses code from such an open source project, then they cannot expect any support from the steward, but it's like their own code. They need to make sure that they fix the bugs and make sure that everything's according to the requirements. So those are the two things, and now kind of tying these two worlds, the manufacturer and the open source, I think the due diligence over there on the open source dependencies is the key. So when the manufacturer learns about a vulnerability in their product that might be in that open source code part, they need to be active towards that open source community, one way or the other, and provide the fixes, hopefully, which then leads to a situation where, well, hopefully this chain of events changes a little bit the dynamics so that the manufacturers would be more active towards the open source communities whose code they are capitalizing on. So that the ones we had the nice curl presentation, and there was a certain industry that uses throughout curl, but is nowhere to be found in the development. So changing that behavior into being more active and supportive may happen. We will see. But I think that's one of the side effects, at least in some of the discussions with where the Commission people have been, I have heard them say. So they are kind of hopeful of this happening. And I mean, from an open source person point of view, I find that appealing possibility. More active contributors would be great. Okay, I already mentioned about the about the harmonized standards. So here we have kind of what else is there in addition to that CRA legal text. So we have this Commission have asked for 41 items to be developed harmonized standards on. It's not 41 standards, but those items are needed to be addressed, and it's with the Sensen Lekanetsi. Then there is going to be additional material created by the Commission, for example, some implementation acts, and nowadays also guideline on open source, which is under work. And then I put this last bucket there, which is best practices. I mean with that all kinds of materials, collaterals, standards in codes that, for example, open source communities might be developing. That would be helpful then to understand and comply. So there's a lot of work now ongoing after the legal text was approved, and this is how it now looks. So we have the harmonized standards are split into two buckets. There's horizontal, which is kind of applicable to all the products, and I think the most kind of really relevant here is this vulnerability handling, because that kind of gives kind of broad picture overall how the vulnerabilities we need to be managed, and there open source actually is being addressed also to some extent, and the debate is ongoing. There is a commenting period just ended, and there's some 900 comments to that vulnerability handling document, so obviously it's not yet ready. And then there are these vertical standards, which are like product or product area specific ones, and then there are these important and critical classes. I don't think that I will go into details of that bunch, but there's plenty, as said. The good thing is that out of the 15 horizontals, we've collapsed this all to 3 standards. So there's only 3 documents you need to read to understand those horizontal standards. On the vertical side, we are not limiting ourselves to the ones that were listed in that request, so there are others already. For example, company that I represent proudly was pushing for one for telecom industry, and that was approved so just recently. So yeah, numbers growing, and that's actually was something that Commission was also looking for, that these vertical standards, so the bottom, would grow over time. So the industries that would need these standards would be working on those for themselves, so that maybe making their life easier. And that's the original list, by design in such a font size that you can't read them. But when you go to the shed and maybe check the slides, maybe there are some interesting ones that you can find. Some of those verticals actually are something that are very much close to open source. So there's operating systems, there's browsers, there's bootloaders, and so there's going to be specific standards for those things. And luckily we also have some open source folks heavily involved there, so there is knowledgeable people helping out. That's the timeline. Like I said, it's short. Well, 2.5 years may sound like a long time, but it will be a blink of an eye, and we are at the end of 27, and everybody needs to comply. So that's a bit of a rush, and there are some milestones there. So I think one to maybe pay attention to is the reporting obligations of vulnerabilities to the manufacturer. So the obligation to the manufacturer to report vulnerabilities is going to be there in 1 year and a month, or let's say 12 months and a couple of days. So clock's ticking, need to be ready. So at least the processes for that vulnerability reporting at every manufacturer should be in place. Hopefully before September 26, so that you don't have to do your acid test with those official reporting organizations. So what can be considered as a sort of an innovation? I think that's that's a nice choice of word. This is not my slide. It's a synopsis report, but still yes. So as we know, majority of the code today is open source. And so far compliance has been geared towards the sort of own code, the proprietary code. And now the CRA is kind of putting the open source also into the limelight. So sort of maybe that's what you kind of a new way of thinking, new way of considering the open source is also necessary for all of us. We do have some challenges at open source with the CRA. First one comes with the text itself. I mean, I'm not a legal person. Oh, and that I should have told in the beginning that there is no legal advice here. Absolutely no. So it's really challenging to grasp. And it's a long one, so there's a lot to remember and kind of how do all these things play together. Then there's the interfacing with regulators. Open source community didn't really have a fluent way of interfacing and discussing with the regulators like Commission earlier, because it was like, who do you call when you call open source? So who do you ask questions? And so that was one big challenge. Then input to standards. So already we have established that standards are created by those two organizations who have their own ways of allowing people to attend, and mere interest doesn't cut it. So either you have to be part of the national delegation, standardization delegation, to take part in the Senelec. ETSI has its own membership, don't have any person memberships. So that was a challenge. Now, and then awareness. I still kind of try to evangelize the CRA, and I still get baffled by the fact that I encounter companies that are like totally clueless that this actually even exists. Even companies who make their living out of selling software. So it's a bit scary. Not funny anymore, it starts to be scary, but a year ago it was still a little bit funny. So how did we actually then get our act together as an open source community? We have now two groups. One is the one that I'm co-chairing. It's the Eclipse's Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group. The other one is Linux Foundation's OpenSSF's Global Cyber Policy Working Group. So these two are communities that gather open source people together and are actively influencing both the standardization and the Commission work, and helping open source community to get their hands around this. Both groups don't limit themselves to the CRA, but obviously CRA is currently the number one focus that they have. So it has been a bit of a steep learning curve, but now I would say that we are in a place where we do have a seat through these two groups in all those groups that are relevant and where we have to be. So next two slides are here to give you a quick insight to what each of these groups are actually doing, but I think it's the best would be for you to go and find these. You can find them in GitHub, and all the materials, all the things that they are working on are there. Just pointing out on documentation side that the ORC just a week ago or so launched or had a release of the first version of the inventory, which is like inventory of all the materials that would be relevant for somebody to, when they try to get up to speed with the CRA. And then there is a CRA FAQ where anybody can ask a question about the CRA, and then as a community we try to address those questions. And if there are open questions, when they are open questions that we are not able to answer as a community, then we bring those, for example, to the Commission through their expert group work, because that shows that there is something that the Commission guidance, for example, should explain. So the CRA is not self-explanatory, need to do something to make the world to understand what this is about. And then there are other areas of work. So input and contributions is direct work. We have one person here in the room who sits in, for example, in Senelec vulnerability handling group and represents the ORC community. And this is a living list. So when the community thinks that there is something lacking, something that needs to be still addressed, and it's worthwhile to have a specific white paper or a specific specification written, then we will add to the work plan. So it's not carving it into stone, and also reflects the fact that we learn while we go. Global Cyber Policy Working Group has split its work in two. So there is the readiness and three. Sorry, I'm not very fluent with big numbers, so it's exactly three groups. So the readiness and awareness, I mean, that's obvious, and there are a couple of nice resources that you can find. The understanding the EU CRA is a kind of a one-on-one or CRA for dummies type of approach, which is really useful if you're kind of want to get to understand what are we talking about when we talk about CRA, and especially the open source impact or influence. And then the brief guide for open source developers, which is also, if you're a developer, maybe that is something that you would like to check. Not a really very long paper, but so also maybe appealing in that sense. Very useful. And if you get intrigued by this group, tomorrow here in these premises, up there, 4th floor, take a lift from the next door. At 1 o'clock, this group will have its meeting. It's open. So if you find it interesting, then and you can fit it in your agenda, then that's an easy way to learn what's happening. And then, of course, after Open Source Summit this week, on Thursday, there's a full day of Open SSF Community Day, which also has some interesting talks related to the CRA in its agenda. So if you're here still on Thursday, maybe check in. Okay, now I'm getting into the last bit, and this is only 2 slides, so not gonna take too long. So I'm using Nokia as an example of how a manufacturer is getting prepared for the CRA. And I think for us, it is probably easier to kind of get into this getting ready to the CRA, because our business, our environment where we work, it's highly regulated. Of course, there are other industries which are equally highly regulated, but I mean, telecom industry is like, yes, there's regulation. It has been there for always. It's highly standardized. Everything's pretty much based on standards. And also those standards are something that are there to guarantee interoperability between different vendors' products. So we've been accustomed to work with our frenemies and customers to get to the common goal in standardization. So I would say that from that perspective, we are in a fairly good position to get ourselves into speed. And so how we do it? So we address it in a way that is sort of that we copy from our regular standardization activities. We create a project, larger project, where we get people from different walks of the company and concentrate on questions that relate to CRA from their expertise point of view. So we have our legal people who read the text and try to explain it to, I'm not an engineer, so to those engineers, but then also to us non-engineers, what it means, and then also provide us some guidance on where kind of further clarifications would be beneficial and so forth. Industry collaboration, that translates into standardization activities. So we are in Sensenelec, we are in Etsy, we are in open source, we are in expert group. So that's all in that industry collaboration where we do things together with other people to try to reach common goal. Government relations, obviously sort of similar to industry relation, but we do have a specific team, for example, reaching out to the Commission. Then huge chunk of work will be on that product processes box, because it's like how do we create our products, how we develop them, what are the documentation, what's the maintenance things, and how do we then inject that vulnerability handling requirements that come from the CRA into our regular vulnerability handling processes. The releases, how would we implement those bug fix releases that are required by the CRA into our regular release machinery and so forth. And then, I mean, all of our products are to some extent using some more, some less open source, but all of them are. So there is a specific emphasis on this, and hence, for example, my presence in ORC working group leadership, because we feel that this is relevant and this is a new thing for the open source. So we think that we need to be there. Specifically in that open source kind of part of the project activity is highlighted and emphasized also internally. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So if nothing else, then your open source folks, then remember those two groups, and please join. If you have any thoughts, any guidance, any questions, get involved. We desperately need more people who are interested and can help us move forward so that we get it as good as possible for the open source. Thank you. We may have, I think it's lunch break right after this, so if somebody wants to spend a portion of their lunch break then asking questions, then I'm happy to spend some of my lunch break to answering them, if I can. Yes? Right. Yeah, the question is that how can you distribute open source software without vulnerabilities, because that's impossible. Agreed. But I think the CRA is actually not demanding that. It's demanding that because there are those vulnerabilities always, then there has to be processes and policies in place, both at the open source community and with the manufacturer who uses that open source code in their product, to address those vulnerabilities when they are spotted. So that's what the CRA is asking. So you need to be able to react when a vulnerability is found. Yeah, but it's like, we know that, for example, in Linux kernel they didn't really have the CVEs. Like, it's a very recent development. They started to kind of track them and have them. So it's definitely a culture change, both at the manufacturers but also at the open source communities to a certain extent. And how it happens then, I mean, how do we kind of develop our cultures in open source so that we are able to address these things? Time will tell. I think there might be different ways, but there has to be a kind of policy and willingness to address those vulnerabilities. And we still have 2.5 years to put in the details to a certain extent on those standards and so forth. So it's I think we get some answers along the way. Are they adequate? Are they enough? Who knows? Maybe we just need to then further improve even after 27. I think the contributors, the maintainers, and those folks actively contributing to the open source and making sure that it exists, they are not liable. So it's because this is about products and how you make products secure. So ultimately, the responsibility is with the manufacturer. So if you're not monetizing, then the requirements are not that heavy on you. It's more like let's try to make best possible software, and then when somebody puts stuff on market, then it's their responsibility to make sure that they are actually complying with the CRA. But it's a complicated thing. And that's, for example, why we have the CRA FAQ, the frequently asked questions, because exactly that type of questions are popping up, and people don't know what lies ahead of them, what is expected from them. So that's why we want to have that the FAQ covering as widely as possible different aspects of the open source in context of CRA. So there's a lot of open questions still. Yes?
Is there a definite definition of what is constitutes? For instance, we provide many code examples for usage of GitHub. This is not like a final product, maybe used in a final product. Is there any guidance?
Well, I don't know if there is a definition of software in that sense, but so you publish that code in GitHub, and it's there, and right, and it's like anybody can take it and do whatever they want with it. So through open source way. So you're not. The CRA is not your headache in that situation. It becomes the headache of the player who takes that code and uses it. when you place it on the market, then that's a product that you place on the market, and then you're a manufacturer, and then yes, all the CRA kicks in. But if there is this code that sits there, then and people can take it and use it for their own purposes, then that's a different track of software activity. It's not simple. It is complicated, and believe me, it's kind of given headaches to many people trying to figure out that how it works out. Plus, it's a moving target, because when in the expert group there is always commission people, and the questions are being asked, so we kind of learn more, and they go like, oh, maybe that was not exactly thought through when the CRA was being crafted. So it's like, it's a moving target as well.
Just mentioned it's not a commercial activity, but one could argue we use this coding Cyber in our framework, which somehow is a commercial activity.
Yeah. There is this gray area, which probably, and when it's about law, one would hope there's like white and black, and the gray area is not really appealing. I agree. Yes, please.
So as a manufacturer, I would be allowed to use such a library which has not been steered.
Yes.
And for such a library, there's no need to have CVE reports. Some cases, is that correct?
Well, if you use that code and somebody reports a vulnerability on your product, on that code, then you need to report that and you need to fix it. And then hopefully you upstream that fix to that project.
But for me as a manufacturer, if I produce something, it would be okay to use such a library.
Yes.
Current safety, if there's no.
I mean, you can. It's up to you what you put into your product. Nobody will question that, but you're responsible for what you put into your product.
But for this library, I'm responsible, yes, but where do I look if there are vulnerabilities? This CVE database?
Yeah, that's well. If that project is kind of using, there is the CVE database is kind of coming into the picture, and I think we have this European one now also being established. So again, it's easy to give a kind of this sort of fairly high-level answer that you're responsible on your product and that's it. But again, the different use cases, there are so many of them, and they are sort of like, they may have slight variations so between themselves. So the answer, it may not be exactly correct in your case. So, and for example, just an anecdotal evidence, when we discuss with the Commission about these things, then they will not give any guidance on how to interpret. They refer to courts. That's where the ultimate truth will then come out. So that's also not very nice situation to be in, but that's where we are. So it's ultimately the interpretation of who's responsible and what did they do the right thing lies with court.
Will that happen after 2027?
After 2027, yeah.
And you're supposed to implement it before?
Yes. And it becomes effective on that day. Next day you should comply. And that's actually some discussion that has now been kind of, some companies have started that that's not fair. There should be some transition period allowed. But that's how the law is written, that it will become in effect end of 27. And changing that would require to open the law to some extent and have the trilogue. All the parties, Parliament, Council, Commission should again agree. and that was a bit painful already in the first round. So I guess there are not too many who are enthusiastic, not at least at the Commission side. It seems to be they are not happy to even discuss that opportunity, the possibility. Yeah.
I'm Max, and I'm a lawyer, so my question is not asking for legal advice, but for a legal scientific question. Do you think from your perspective that the legal license compliance will be a sub-requirement of the CRA?
I don't know, and now I can say that because I'm not a legal, I don't have legal education. I dare not to say anything on that. Sorry about that. I could consult our legal counsel who is on that legal part of the project, but no, I can't give any answer. Yes. Well, I mean, yeah. But the the idea is that there is enough of those. I mean, the horizontal standards, the relevant ones, would be already existing by that time. So that's why there is this reporting period set to that date, because the horizontal ones that would be give probably enough guidance how to do that reporting are in place, and then the specific ones will be a year after. So that's the reason why the reporting obligation kicks in earlier. So I think the idea is that there is enough material for people to comply with the law at that point, to that extent. Yeah.
Even your old products and your existing products, you have to report all vulnerabilities and everything that you have done in the past. This has got nothing to do with legacy on your phone. This is, you can't hide stuff anymore. You can't pretend you don't have problems. You have to report regularly. Everything.
Okay, anybody hungry? Okay, thank you.